This series is a jigsaw puzzle, and sometimes I'll put a piece on the table that has meaning without drawing attention to it. Let me give you an example from the last episode where we looked at the back of the painting. Remember this label? It has two names, a date and some numbers on it. It looks very old, and I can honestly say that I'm not certain what the names are, but I know what the top right name looks like. In 2023, the Rijksmuseum held the greatest ever exhibition of Vermeer's paintings. They managed to assemble 28 of his 37 paintings. 2 of those paintings were upgraded from doubtful to authentic for that exhibition, and one painting that an American museum cast doubt on was reaffirmed by the Rijksmuseum as authentic. It's interesting that 3 of his now 37 paintings, or almost 10% of his output, was in play in terms of its authenticity as recently as 2023. Prior to this exhibition, the next greatest assemblage of Vermeer's paintings was also in Amsterdam, and it happened at an auction sale in 1696, almost 21 years after Vermeer's death. In May 1696, 21 of Vermeer's paintings from the estate of a Delft printer were auctioned. The printer inherited the paintings from his wife, who likely inherited most of them from her parents. The printer's name was Jacob Decius. The name on the label appears to start with a D, and the third and fourth letters appear to be the same, maybe S. It's just another coincidence perhaps, but it's interesting. Welcome back to Vermeer's Child. In this episode we're going to look at lumps and bumps and cracks to see if the painting is actually old. But because that's pretty easy to deal with, I want to take you on another brief but important diversion. But stay until the end of the episode for something you've never seen before, and I'm pretty certain you'll never see again. This is a table of Vermeer's paintings that are all around about the same height or width as the little auction painting. In fact, you can see the little auction painting just here up, and that's about 51 centimetres by 41 centimetres pretty much. The circle up on the top right hand corner indicates a cluster of paintings that Vermeer had, which are all around about the same dimension. In fact, there's 8 paintings in that group that are all around about 51 centimetres tall by around about 45 centimetres wide. And that was obviously very much a preferred height because 20% of his canvases in total are in that little cluster. Now, there's also a cluster of paintings that are about the same width, and those are the ones in the yellow circle. And you can see that the auction painting width of 41 centimetres just turns out to be exactly the same width as, for example, the Milkmaid. And the auction painting height turns out to be pretty much identical to Woman with a Pearl Necklace. It's 2 millimetres difference. So, although it doesn't share the 2 dimensions with any other painting, it does share the height with 8 paintings and the width with 4 paintings. Now, it's no big deal that it's an outlier, because if you notice around the circle of these paintings, there's some other outliers. In fact, there's about 5 even in the same size range. So it's not particularly unusual that he painted paintings of different sizes, and that doesn't necessarily rule it out. But there is one painting I want to point out, and that's the Little Street, which is the 43.5 width and 53.5 height. That's just off to the left of the little circle in blue. And what's interesting about that is that's exactly 1 inch wider and taller than the auction painting. So that makes it exactly the same proportions as the auction painting, but also when we get to have a look at the detail of the auction painting, we're going to find a lot of details between the 2 paintings that are very consistent. So that's one that we'll be coming back to quite a lot. There'll be some other paintings we'll be coming back to quite a lot as well, but that one in particular is of interest. So that gives you an idea of the paintings that were in the ballpark of this size range that Vermeer painted. In this general size range, Vermeer painted just about half of his paintings, so it's obviously a size range that he came to prefer quite significantly during the course of his career. Now, none of that matters in terms of the authenticity of the auction painting. All it means is it's in the ballpark of the sizes that Vermeer used. So let's get down onto the surface of the painting and see whether it's as old as the canvas support. To help you visualise the size of what we're looking at in terms of the size of the details, the child's head is about 20 millimetres, or 3/4 of an inch long, from his hairline to his chin. For me, that's about the same size as the top joint of my little finger. As a general observation, it's clear that there's a lot of thick paint or impasto on areas of this painting, and there's a lot of cracking and some visible losses of paint. The largest areas of paint loss are along the left side of the painting, but note that what should be the bare canvas or white chalk of the ground layer is in fact still painted brown. It seems likely that this area has been retouched, whereas the loss of paint on the top left corner and the other corners hasn't been retouched. Note also that the painted surface is exactly the same size as the canvas, so the forger had to find a canvas from the right period of exactly the right proportions. The thin milky white paint that we saw over the top of the signature in episode 1 is also over large areas of the floor on the lower left. There are also a couple of very distinct lines that emphasise the edge of the floor tiles in this area that look a bit like later additions. I'm guessing that the person who added the white paint obliterated the floor joints, then added some back in. One is a blue-grey colour, and there are others that are black, and they do seem odd. There's also overpainting on the top right window in the panel where the name might have been, and the same in the top left window, although the name might still be possible to detect in that one. There is also some overpainting above the door. Strangely, there appears to be a shape behind that overpainting that looks like it was something that sat on top of the door. Damage to the painting is relatively minor in terms of the areas of total losses, and in each case there is nothing that indicates that this is a modern painting. In general, the paint loss exposes the chalk ground layer, but in some areas the bare canvas is visible. There's a lot of impasto or thick paint in some areas, but it's largely confined to each discrete area. Sometimes the thick paint clearly shows a painted object, such as this strange golden painted shape on the floor that seems to intersect the area where I found the signature and the date. I don't know what this object is, but it's clearly something. The green back wall also has a lot of impasto, but it stays within the boundaries of the wall, so if it represents something, that thing must be hanging on the wall. There are also some inexplicable impasto lines running from the wall across the woman's dress. Just to the left of the woman's head, there are strange lines of dots that continue across her head and onto the door. They do form part of this painting, but how they were achieved with such precision is a mystery. Oil paint usually slumps, so the build-up of these tiny details would be extremely difficult without some thickening agent. We'll be having a look at what they are in a future episode. Finally, rolling focus across the painting in raking light reveals a network of tiny cracks and cupping of the paint in many areas. The authenticity of the age of the cracks is very obvious when we zoom in on the woman's and child's faces. As with everything, this will need examination by experts, but with the exception of some unexplained impasto lines on the woman's dress, there's nothing that points to this being a new painting on an old canvas. In fact, it seems far more likely that this painting is one of the estimated 1% of paintings that have survived from the Dutch Golden Age. And now to the fun bit. When I first bought the painting, I was puzzling about how to work out how old it was when I found a research paper by a mathematician showing how the pattern of cracks in a painting could show where it came from. I wanted to see if my painting had cracks of a similar pattern to Dutch paintings, but I couldn't work out how to see the pattern. So I hit on the idea of shining a spotlight through the painting. Of course, I didn't have one, so I went to the local hardware store and bought a work light. Now, the problem with work lights is they get very hot, and because the light would leak around the sides of the painting, I had to get the light right up against the painting and work super fast to turn on the light and snap the picture and turn it off again before cremating the painting. Now, this clumsy process resulted in images that aren't great. They are a bit fuzzy, which is probably testament to my blind panic. But for anyone who's ever wondered what is holding a 17th century oil painting together, the answer is not much. It's also funny how you miss things with this painting. I just noticed when I looked at these couple of images that there's some distinctive shapes just under the arch in this photo. I wonder if you missed anything. There was a piece of the jigsaw hidden in this episode. I wonder if you saw it. In the next episode, we're going to look at the similarities and differences between this painting and Peter de Hoogh's painting to see if there's any logic to the theory that this might be the original. And in case you're wondering, this series does have an end point, but it's still a bit to go before we get there. I hope you stay, because after holding his basket for over 350 years, this little child deserves your attention. Please consider giving this video a like and subscribing so you don't miss a future episode. As always, thanks for watching.